more of that sort of pointy shape. He's going to need one more door for a key. So you can see we've got these multiple sets of doors. So we can keep opening these. Just make larger and larger pieces. Okay, you want me to do that now? Okay. Yeah. So George is what we call the gaffer. He's in charge. You want one more door? So he's in charge. So as the assistant, he tells me what he needs. And he said, right at the top of that second handle, I'm going to torch it with a secondary torch. We call this the hot torch. It's oxygen and propane. We can turn this up to nearly 4,000 degrees. So I'm going to focus some heat just in this top section. He's going to maintain temperature at the bottom. This is so they can even out these handles a little bit. So he's going to cut a little bit of this glass off where these handles connected. Just going to match a little closer. He's balancing out that temperature. Big torch, right at the hot torch. So there we go. Cuts that free. Then make these match a little more closely. So you can see that the working time now, it's gotten much shorter. So he sits down at the bench and maybe has 15 or 20 seconds to really be changing whatever he wants to change. Then he's got to get right back to the heat. Early on, that glass was thick, it was condensed, so it stayed hot for a long time. But now that it's thin, it's cooling much, much faster. So it's thermal mass. And that's really one of the things we have to think a lot about and consider while we are working. So you give you a little head nod. That means he's all done with this piece. So we'll catch this with some forks. These are wrapped in a fiberglass rope. So I'll catch this piece. And then to keep it, we have to slowly cool this. If we let it sit out in the open air, it'll cool too quickly. Remember, it'll crack and break. So we'll load this into a 900-degree oven here on the side of our stage, called the annealer. We will anneal this glass. We'll slowly cool it down to room temperature overnight. So to break this free from that empty connection, I would just use a butter knife to create a little bit of stress. Tapping that connection with the butter knife, and then it breaks free. There it is. Beautiful double helicopter handle bowl. We'll tuck this way into the oven. We'll see this piece in tomorrow after it does cool down. So that cooling time is determined by the thickness of the pieces that we make. And that piece is pretty thin. It means we can cool it pretty quickly, about 8 hours. There we have a beautiful, I have one more round of applause. That's George Kenner, everyone. So yeah, any questions? Yeah. Right. Yeah, so the annealing, it will slowly cool the glass from 900 down to room temperature. So it will hold at 900 until the end of the day. After our final demonstration, that's when we start that program to cool the glass. And it's really nice. It's a touch screen, so you can just say, oh, we want to cool it for 8 hours, or 10, or 12, or 16, or 32 hours. You know, we can just choose, and then it's programmed to cool that automatically within that set time. Yeah. Sure, the initial material, you probably heard the glass is made of sand, which is correct. We're using silicon, so really clean, pure, refined sand mined out of the earth. We also add soda ash, and then we also add limestone. The soda ash is a flux that helps the glass melt at a lower temperature. Limestone stabilizes that recipe. Without it, glass is actually water soluble. It will break down just from humidity in the air over time. But we don't start with the raw materials. We get glass from a company in Washington State. They melt those 3 raw materials for us, and they send us these cubes of glass. So we just shovel this into the furnace. It's much cleaner, it's much safer. Yeah, give me loud for me up there. No, I'm sorry. Did somebody, doesn't help? Yeah. Yep. So we melt these in the furnace. So every few days we'll add maybe 50 to 100 pounds, maybe even 150 pounds of this. At the end of the day, by the time we come in the morning, it's melted down and it's ready to use. Yeah. Does that answer the question? Yeah, perfect. Yeah. How do we get the camera in the furnace? We don't. We don't. We have an ordinary camera. We have extraordinary glass. We have a fancy window at the back of the furnace. And it seems silly to have a window at the back of a glass melting furnace, but this glass, it's the specialty glass called fused silica. It was invented here in Corning in 1934. They didn't really have a use for it, but this fused silica doesn't melt until nearly 4,000 degrees. So it wasn't until years later NASA needed some glass that withstand re-entry back into Earth's atmosphere, as well as the extreme cold temperatures of outer space. So Corning Incorporated gave NASA this same glass. So that's a good question. That's a question we get all the time. How is there a camera in the furnace? And the question is, we've tricked you. It's not in there at all. But we also, right next to the camera, I love this, is hilarious to me, right next to the camera, we have a fan that blows on the camera to make sure it doesn't overheat. One time the camera died, and when we went back there, we learned that actually the fan had stopped working, and that probably preceded the death of the camera, so we had to replace both.
Sense of the malleability of the glasses. Would it be like clay?
Yeah, what's the malleability? I've never pulled taffy, but people always say that it's very similar to taffy. But it's also always changing. So when we get the glass out of the furnace, we say it's got the same consistency, viscosity as honey. It's really runny and drippy. But with time, it starts to harden. It starts to set up and become rigid. So it's always changing, and that window is really short. But I've had a lot of people say that it's similar to taffy, but I've never pulled taffy. Yeah, right. Yeah, the question was, are we going off field? Time-wise, we have that sort of sense of experience. It is all of the above, yeah. So when we first started learning how to blow glass, we're always just guessing what the temperature of glass is, and we're terrible guessers, and that's why we break things all the time. But once you break things enough, you start to develop this internal timer. And that's another tricky thing that's always changing, is that, I said that as that glass was cooling, as it was thinner, it was cooling faster and faster. So that's something that you have to just gauge as well with time and experience. So we look for mostly how the glass is moving as our best indicator of temperature. The more it moves, the hotter it is, the less it's moving, the colder it is. So when it stops moving, probably around 1100 degrees Fahrenheit, that's when that timer really starts to kick in. Like, oh, better get back to the furnace. I want this to blow up. We can also look at the clarity a little bit as well, and that's not always super reliable, especially in this space with a lot of natural light. So if it's a sunny day, that glass will look colder. If it's a cloudy day, the glass looks hotter, just because you can see that glow in the material a little brighter. But when that glow is gone, when that glass looks really clear, it's really cold, and you're probably about to break something. So if there's a little bit of yellow, a little bit of orange, that's a little bit of safety. How cold what? How cold is really cold? 1,000 degrees. That's really cold in the glass studio. So it's relative. But also at the end of the day, you go home, maybe take a pizza out of the oven, 425 degrees. Child's play. Well, you've been really great. If you have more questions, feel free to stick around, but I'm going to let you all go. There's plenty to explore. So enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thanks so much.